is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. Rob Barretts is my engineer, and time now for a challenge. Enter the mind of a serial killer and find the truth. Coy Costa made the leap and raises some disturbing possibilities in his book entitled Pogo Traditions. Coy, this book gives me chills.
I don't know if you've heard of John Wayne Gacy.
Of course.
But he had a clown name, which was Pogo. And so I integrated that when I started doing some research on a couple of murders that were prior to his time. What struck me is that there were some similarities between Chicago and California and some names that I cross-referenced. And it turns out that there seems to be a lot of coincidences and a lot of areas where there may have been some connections, maybe within the family. And I say that because sometimes when somebody goes crazy like Gacy was in his state of mind, usually those things aren't born given. And so I was thinking, well, what if he learned these kind of things from like his family? What if his family had a history within this all? And so it kind of gave me a story within to kind of build upon. Therefore, I called it Pogo Traditions. And I integrated that with the murders of Elizabeth Short, which would be the Black Dahlia, and another murder that happened about a year prior, which was Susan Dignan, which had very similarities to the Dahlia murder. It took me 2 years. Being a firefighter, there's a lot of crisis that we have to face. And I went through some struggles in my time, and so I had to step away for a little while. And so I started doing some research on murder photographs and stuff like that to see if I was still able to look at these things and integrate, understand it and be okay with it. And so when I started researching and looking at the Dahlia murders, it kind of struck me because I saw something that was, of course, it was an unsolved mystery, but the way that the body was laid out, it kind of intrigued me. So I got deep into it and started reading more about it. And then I accidentally stumbled across another murder, which was the one in Chicago. And that one was politically motivated. And so I kind of put it together. And it was interesting because what struck me the most part about it is that where she had died in Hollywood, the next street over was actually Dignan, which is the name of the little girl that died the year before. And both of the streets run together and come together as Dignan Avenue. So I kind of ran with it. And at the end, it really goes back into Gacy's story and his childhood, what it must have been like. So it's a story that I've created. As far as his actual childhood, I didn't go into that because I don't really know anything about that.
Okay.
So I just created it based on kind of some of my own history and what I've been through in my childhood. And there were a lot of similarities that I found.
Like what?
I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse for years. And so I was wondering, through the similarities that, I had an abusive father who was an alcoholic and, he beat me regularly and also, sexually. And there were just things that I always wondered, if he hadn't have died when he died, would I be a crazy guy too? Would I be out there killing people or something, And so I had to dive into the reality of it all and just make it up and see where I could go with it. I'm getting therapy and I'm getting help now and I feel good about myself. And this actually helped me take a deep breath and just realize, wow, that person, that John Wayne Gacy guy as a child, he must have gone through a lot, to do what he did. So it was really interesting for me to go through. I wrote it, but I was afraid to just put it out there. And now I feel good about it because it's just that one step that helps me come out, and helps me free myself. And at the same time, tell a story that's just blows things out of the water.
All right, Coy, great work. And now for something completely different. Dawn Sandusky is not the author of our next book. She is the inspiration for It's For You Alone. And the author is?
William Conti. He actually has been no part of this actual publishing of it except for him signing all the paperwork. But he wrote this book for me about 18, 19 years ago.
Sounds like he was in love with you.
Well, what can I say? He was, but at that particular time in my life, I was going through a divorce after 40 years, and he was a friend of a friend, and he was wanting to buy a car, and so he called me, and my friend had said that, she's selling her car, so I took the car over there, and he liked it, and he bought it, started a relationship. But what happened was took it to a whole other level that I was not prepared for or even really wanted, but he's a wonderful man, a doll. He's a doll. We're still friends today. He's a doll. He's gone on with his life, and he's with somebody else. I chose to stay single and love it. But at the time, it was everything. It was the end-all, be-all. And in his writings, it starts off with him meeting me, and for about a year we dated, and he would come over all the time, and every time he would come over or whatever, he would write 3 or 4 poems. He's a wonderful writer, and he specialized in kind of a haiku format. And so he would bring me these on beautiful stationery. If it was Valentine's Day, the stationery would be, hearts and flowers or whatever. And this went on for about a year. Well, then when I said to him, this just isn't going to work, I love you to death, still love you today, but we're two different people. We're completely two different people. And so that following year, I didn't talk to him hardly at all. He put this book together, and he had it bound, illustrations and everything. But Page Publishing couldn't use the illustrations because of copyright laws. And so that's how the book came about. And one day he had called me, and he goes, "What have you been up to?" And I said, "Oh, not much." I said, "I just saw an ad for Page Publishing that says they'll publish your work." And he'd go, "God, I'd love that." So the rest is history. And matter of fact, I just got off the phone with Mr. Conti, and I said, "We're expecting a phone call." He goes, "Oh, you handle all of that." He goes, "You handle it." I said, "Okay." And then I thought to myself, well, nothing new. I've been handling it all this time, which is probably a reason why, I wasn't his type and he wasn't mine.
Yeah, you're the doer, he's the artist. Well, at least it's out there. Thanks, Don. Michael J. grew up with 10 brothers and sisters in the projects in New Haven, Connecticut. He wasn't a great student and found out years later he was dyslexic. He was 20 years old at the end of his senior year in high school when a school bake sale forever changed his life. He baked a cake, just like his mom taught him, which led to a very successful career in the hotel restaurant industry, and now his book entitled Sex, Drugs, and Ronald Reagan. Michael.
So what happened was, ended up with a complete replica of the high school with the windows and doors and the football field behind it and everything. And I brought it in. The principal went crazy and called the radio station and the TV station. They came down interviewing me and all that stuff. And my teacher came up to me and said, "You are half a point short of graduating this year." I said, "Oh, my God." So she said, "Wait here." She went up and she changed it. And I was able to graduate. I got into the culinary school. My whole life exploded from there. And then I had my first job was with Nelson Rockefeller at the All Sable Club in Essex County, New York. After that, I had gotten a job at the Ocean House in Wattsfield, Rhode Island, a luncheon for Jacqueline Kennedy. And then went in the Navy, came out, and that's how I got into the hotel business because there was no sex jobs around. I worked my way up to general manager and American Motor Ends. So I used to tell my friends the stories that were happening. You wouldn't believe what happened last night, or this, that, the other, or there was someone shot somebody or something. There are stories in there about murders, attempted murders, suicides, attempted suicides, robberies. I was there 17 years.
Okay.
Yeah, then I came back up to Connecticut, and so I had 3 cafeterias in the catering business.
Let me ask you this, Michael. The name of your book is Sex, Drugs, and Ronald Reagan. What does Ronald Reagan have to do with anything?
When he was running for president, he stayed at my hotel in North Carolina, and we got to be, good friends and everything else. And
What do you mean?
because when he came there, we talked about food and everything else, and I cooked him dinner one night, filet of sole with a hollandaise sauce on it, which is unheard of, and he loved it.
Did you guys stay in touch?
No, he said to me that if you were coming through here again, he said he would stay nowhere else but in my hotel. So I said that. I thanked him very much for that. From where I was down south, I got transferred with the same company to Gaithersburg, Maryland, and I had 7 rooms on the top floor. We made a presidential suite out of it. It was the most expensive suite in the entire world, and people came from all over the world just to stay at the hotel. And people stayed there like Paul Anka stayed there, Red Fox, Slappy White, Stiller and Mayer, George Carlin.
All of these stories are contained in your book.
It's been being put together for years. It was like I told you, I had dyslexia, and I had stacks and stacks of paper. So I wrote all the stuff, but I had to put it together. And this miracle thing that they came out with was, have you ever heard of this dragon? You hook it up to your computer, and you talk into the microphone, and it types it out for you.
Oh, yes. So that's how you were able to do it.
So that's how I got it written.
Okay.
And then I had my son, who was a teacher, help me edit it. When I finished the book, I had 1,000 pages. So he cut it in half. And so that's how this book came out. Now, if this sells well, which I hope it does, Page Publishing wants to publish the other half. And at the end of the other half, it'll blow your mind. I already have people that own restaurants and bars and stuff like that, and I've talked to a lot of people and everything, and they all want to have a book signing. And I'm also going to try to get onto Fox News, because they got too many celebrities going on there pushing their books, and I want a shot at it. The snotty-nosed little kid that grew up with dyslexia becomes an author.
See that, Michael? You're an inspiration. Jamie Besant did 2 tours in Iraq, and in 2005, he started writing to get his mind off some of the duties he was required to perform, including running security patrols through Baghdad. He was also a volunteer firefighter in Texas, so he draws on both experiences in his book entitled The Firefight. Jamie, in your book, you rescue a beautiful woman from a fire. Is that for real?
No. The woman in the book is based off of my wife. So.
But you didn't rescue her in a fire.
No, I didn't.
And
I
really,
would though.
And really, that's only part of the story, because you have a daughter who gets killed in a car accident.
Well, I've never had a daughter get killed in an accident, but I do have a daughter. She's 6 years old right now.
Yeah, I guess you're imagining if you lost your daughter, you would be hell-bent on revenge.
Yeah, I would.
All right.
That's where the book takes you. It takes you to the main character as he loses his family. And a twist in the book is, even though he loses his daughter and his wife is pregnant at the time, but they don't know it. So he actually has a son now. But they didn't know that they were pregnant. So here he is with a brand new baby boy, and he doesn't know what to do. So he hires a nanny with the help of his best friend's wife. They hire a nanny, and later on in the story, they develop a bond and a relationship, and they get married. After he locates the guy that causes the wreck and tortures him and kills him and disposes of the body.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, revenge. Oh, definitely revenge.
But he's a murderer then.
It's a little twist in there that I threw in there, so.
Okay. So then we go into the next book.
Right. The next book follows the 2 sons of the main characters in my first book.
Okay. So you're like writing all the time now.
Yeah. I've never even thought about writing a book, and then after my first tour in Iraq, I'm like, well, I need to do something to take my mind off all this. And I was drinking heavily, but I haven't drank in 4 years, so.
So this kind of helps you relieve stress, is to write.
It does.
All right. Well, the feelings of revenge and seeing families blown apart by unfortunate circumstances, does that come from when you were in Iraq?
Some of it, yeah. Things I've saw, some of the interrogations that I saw, yeah. It's part of my job.
Was to interrogate people?
No. I just happened to see some of that. Wasn't supposed to see it, but I was at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Well, I'm glad you're not there anymore, and I hope the writing helps.
It does. Because right now, where I got my main character at in my second book, I got him down in South America doing counter-drug ops. And that's what I did on my first ship. We did counter-narcotic drug ops down in South America. We confiscated 8.5 tons of cocaine on my first ship.
Wow.
Within 6 months.
All right. So what's next?
Well, I've already talked with the American Legion Post, and we're gonna hold a book signing there. And then I'm going to contact the fire department here in Muncie and see if they can help me promote the book. And I sent some information down to my aunt and cousin down in Texas. That's where all my family is. So they're taking the flyers and the bookmarkers to work and passing them out to promote my book there. And I've contacted the VA over in Chicago where I was going, and the senior case manager over there, I've sent him some stuff, and he's passed them out to other veterans and his other personnel for his team. So.
All right, Jamie, you're on your way. And we are on our way into a very, very short break. Stay with us.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books, and unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them, and they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything: copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Page Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. For your free author submission kit, call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.
Okay, we're back on the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. A recently retired underwriter for a life insurance company, Christian Mark has found his future, and it's writing. His first book, entitled The Golden Child, details his struggles and his joy of being a supportive and loving brother. Mark.
Yes, it's about a brother and sister growing up together. The sister's adopted at a young age, and the brother and sister are very close together, and they also have a shared love of music. The sister comes down with a mental illness as an adolescent, and I wrote about kind of the journey through the mental health system and effects it had on the family over a period of about 40 years. Part of it was the growing up period, and the other part of it being involved in the mental health system and monitoring the sibling.
Are you still involved with this?
Yes, I am. And what I did, there's a music theme throughout the story, using the music as a time frame reference throughout the book, and also a mystery that wraps around the whole story of the adopted child and how she came to the family through the adoption process.
What are some of your observations?
Observations of how the mental health system has changed from the 1960s to the 1990s, how it was pretty archaic in the 1960s, and there weren't a lot of options for people with mental health issues, and then how it's progressed since, and how the staff and the people that are social workers and doctors and lawyers have become much more progressive in how they look at mental health and how they treat mental health patients.
So it's getting better?
It's getting better, yes, which is basically brought forth in the story. People with mental disabilities are living better lives and more fulfilled lives. And mystery part of the book comes to a conclusion at the end, which is related to state adoption process and how it was back in the 1950s and how it is currently. My wife's family has a lot of siblings in the mental health business or have worked in the past in the mental health business. So I could rely on them for input on certain situations.
Are you going to go out and talk about this?
Yes, I'm sending complimentary books to various newspapers, to Massachusetts Psychiatric Society, to some radio stations, and some other people that are centers of influence in that community. And depending on how the sales of the book go, I also have an interest in donating a portion of the proceeds to mental health charities.
That's great.
I have another book that I'm almost finished with, and I'd like to market this book for the next year or so, and then after that I'd be publishing the next book. I hope there are good things that come out of this in the future.
All right, Mark, I hope so too. And I'm sure the mental health community will appreciate anything positive you have to say. Samantha Ansu lives on a horse farm and works with preschool kids in upstate New York. She started writing poetry when she was 12, and 10 years later, she's ready to close the book, so to speak, and open a new chapter. The name of her book, Silent Rose Cry. Samantha.
The driving aspect to publish this book was to kind of close the child's part of my life. So it was like a symbolic closure to the past. and some things that I've had to overcome.
Okay, like?
My poems deal with a variety of things from terrible relationships, abuse, and just depression.
Is there a favorite?
For me, Bleeding Heart is probably a favorite just because it pulls on a lot of heartstrings and it's easily for anyone to relate to. And even as the author, it's still hard for me to read it without crying. So I like that it is allowed to like draw the audience in and everything.
What's it about?
It's about losing a loved one. So it's easy to kind of draw people in and overcoming that deal.
Do you read your poems in public ever?
I have read them in public a couple times in poetry slam things in Rochester.
Good. What kind of response have you gotten?
I've gotten a lot of good response so far. A lot of people like it. Some people say it's a little dark for them.
Have you ever set your poetry to music?
I have. Actually, the first poem that's in the book, Holding On, I actually wrote as a song. It's kind of like a country, just slow beat, and then some faster spots into it. I don't include the music with it. I'm basically just hoping, letting people know that they're not alone in some situations, because a lot of it brushes against like suicidal stuff. Because I've lost 10 people to suicide, so there's a
You
lot of that.
Why?
Domino effect with some of them, and then guilt from a car accident.
That's so difficult. There was nowhere for them to go?
They didn't feel like there was, so yeah. And that was one of my major driving points to get this published, because a lot of the pieces in it are me trying to deal with that and stay afloat myself.
And trying to deal with the loss of friends who felt that the only way out was to kill themselves.
Yes. And then I've also lost some to cancer, so my book is basically just driven on pain and coping with that.
So, what would you like to see happen?
Best thing to happen with this book is that it's able to reach at least one person, that it makes a difference in their life and it shows them that they're not alone and that they can get through whatever is happening in their life.
What's
I am
next?
going to be doing book signings. I hope to be setting one up at Barnes & Noble in Webster very soon.
Okay.
They are carrying my book.
How'd that happen?
I had talked to them and they were willing to put it in their local author section. And then I'm also going to be doing one at Ontario's summer send-off thing that they do, which is kind of like a end of summer carnival that they have. I'm not sure where I'm going after that. I am writing still now. I right now have another poetry book in the works, and I also have a kids book in the works.
All right, Samantha. Good work. I'm sure we'll talk again. Finally, Des Tovar was a trucker for many years, and she got a lot of ideas on the road, particularly a cemetery she used to pass often in Terre Haute, Indiana. It inspired her to write her first book entitled Bellowing Horrors. All right, so two friends take a road trip in a VW bus after high school and wind up in a town that has a secret.
Yeah, so they're taking this road trip. They decided to take a shortcut, and what happened was they ended up taking this wrong turn and ended up in this town. And then things started happening, and they couldn't get out of it. Their car gets a flat tire. That starts it off. So they're trying to get to the gas station or whatever to get it fixed, and then that's when they start running into like freaky people and a bunch of different freaky weird stuff that kept them there. For example, after they couldn't get their tire fixed, then they told them go ahead and go spend the night, and they kind of send them over to this one place that happens to have a room, and at night is when everybody's out and functioning. And then during the day, they get these freaky storms, so they have to get, to bed or whatever you want to call it, and need to get under cover. Otherwise, they get eaten by the storms. But then at night, once they wake up, then they're trapped. I mean, their Volkswagen bus gets trashed out, when it's supposed to be safe in a shop. And, then they're just trying to figure out any kind of way to leave. It's kind of weird. The thing is, it's about aliens. About alien vampires, But it does, I guess in the first book, it doesn't hit on it too hard on, about that. And Bellowing Hollers, it doesn't hit that hard on. The second, the one that I'm writing right now, goes more in depth on that alien vampire part.
So all this weird stuff happens in this book, but we don't know why?
Yeah, so they got stuck in the town, but at the end of the book, basically the town blows up, and it kind of leaves you thinking about there's an actual spaceship that, emerges up, and that's what destroys the town. And then, the FBI comes in, and they keep everything undercover, and it's, for example, like they got rid of all the animals, and the only thing that's left that's actually helping them is a cat, so it's like an alien cat kind of deal.
And then in the second book, we find out that there's aliens and vampires running around.
Right, and they're actually alien vampires. So.
Oh, alien vampires. Okay.
Yeah, it's alien vampires.
Well, how do you tell people about this book?
I've done a couple, different things, but, I did the book release party, and then I've had a couple little small signings. I've got a website, and then I do a lot of Facebook and, Instagram and all that stuff. I'm going to probably this summer start focusing on, traveling around and getting in different places, doing more book signings. What happened is I started working on the second book really hard, and so I'm kind of pushing it back, and I'm like, man, I don't know if that's good or bad, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that second book can be a distraction, but it's all good, Des. At least you're doing something to get the word out about that first book, so keep on trucking. All right, that is a wrap for this edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. I hope you are enjoying your summer and writing down all the ideas you're getting so you can start writing your first book. I hope you're getting some ideas right here on the Page Publishing Book Club. If you missed anything, all you have to do is go to 710WOR.com. Go to our podcast and knock yourself out. We are here for you. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Catch you next time, writers.